Indeed, a pleasure for us to welcome in the commissioner, co-founder of the CEBL, also spent 12 years in the CFL, most outstanding Canadian, and a couple of Grey Cups tossed in there, spent some time with the CFLPA, and he's kind enough to join us today. Mike Morreale is our guest. Mr. Morreale, how do we find you today?
I'm doing well, Mr. Kerr. Thanks so much. I'm doing well. A little rainy here. I'm working from home today, so this is a nice little chance to think about and talk about sports, during the day. Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that, and I'm sure you're like me, and you wait for opportunities like this. Halfway through the league, and I mentioned the standings, from a competitive balance standpoint, you have to have a smile on your face, don't you?
I do, and I made a post earlier today. I retweeted one looking at we got the West up there now, but looking at the East standings and going, oh my goodness, we have some funny math to do as you take a look at them right there. But this is exactly what we hope for when we designed this league, created this league going back 6 or 7 years ago. The idea was to create a single entity model, and what that model allowed was high brand standards, consistent brand standards, but also consistency on the player side, on what happened on the court as well. And we're seeing it kind of play out before our eyes right now, which is fantastic. It's been a tremendous start to the year. I'm curious, now I'm turning into the interviewer. I'm curious how, pro basketball and CEBL basketball, how that's been in Calgary for you guys, because it's new to you, right? It's old to me, but it's new to you.
Yeah, and I would answer it this way. First of all, the end, the FIBA rules at the end, the score,
the target
score. Everybody says the same thing. Oh, I didn't think I'd like it. I love it. Love it. We've had people come from the station and the Nation Network go down, and that's what they rave about. You've always got a winner. Yeah. I would say, from my vantage point, the thing that's most important to me is I see the merchandise in the community. I see kids wearing Surge jerseys. I see adults wearing Surge hats. I was at a CPL game with the Cavalry on the weekend, and I saw Surge merchandise. So to me, I'm seeing the little things that lead me to believe there's adoption. That there's a lot of positivity to it. How much it can grow, we're about to find out. But really excited about the early, the early adoption of this team. And I would say, almost by design, ownership didn't go out and buy a lot of billboards, didn't do a lot of television and radio, traditional media buys, built it on the word of mouth. And it's been pretty exciting so far. That's my observation.
Yeah, and I echo that. And, Usman and Jason and the whole team at the Surge have done a really job making it very organic, very natural. I know you and I have spoken about that in my visits to Calgary, but we see that in all of our markets, right? The idea, even if you go back to the very beginning, was not to go and ask for a handout. This was going to be, let us come there, give us a good deal on the venue, the best deal you can give us, and we'll prove to you that we've created something here that the community will follow, and we will in turn give back to the community and show high-level basketball, very high-level basketball, but also very high-level entertainment. So all those things are paying off organically, which leads me to believe that, once it becomes more mainstream, which is just like any new league has to grow to become mainstream, we've already got a really good foundation, not just in Calgary, but across the league as well, which is a great footprint to build from.
So what is mainstream? As you would define mainstream, what are you looking for?
Well, I always like to refer to us as the CFL of basketball, and people, there's a lot of similarities, but there's also, I got to pay homage to the league that has been here for 110 some odd years. They were, up until the CPL and us started, 5 years ago, officially on court or on the pitch, there was only one domestic league in this country, and it's the CFL. And you have to learn from it. Everybody who's either involved, or most of the people involved in the CEBL or the CPL, in some way, shape, or form had, ties to the CFL. So when I say the CFL of basketball, I'm really paying homage to the fact that that league's been around for a long, long time. That does a lot of really good things. One is the Canadiana, and the other is the community engagement and activation and belonging to the community and the fan bases that are created. So if we can mimic the growth of the CFL, we operate differently, and we've had the luxury of being able to start from scratch. So we've been able to build our league in a way that we can scale properly. and are prepared to scale. But if we can get into that mainstream, meaning if we can be on broadcast television more often than we are, if we can be on the linear channel as many times as possible, if that is the place to be at a point in time, because that could change, right, as things continue to grow. But if we're talked about in mainstream markets and media, and the big, Canadian press and everyone else tied to, what makes sports tick and how you get your relevant information, then I feel like we're hitting our stride. Now, having said that, if I ask people outside of Canada if they know about the CEBL or what they've heard about the CEBL, those that have, they will praise us for our level of play, our quality of play, and the way the league is run. In Canada, because this is very much a Canadian thing, it's almost like we got to continue to claw and fight and scratch to get there. But that's okay, because that actually makes us a better league and better teams and better operators by really continuing to work and not resting on our laurels.
So with a little exposure to the NLL, I know that at times box lacrosse has talked about possibly expanding the schedule and how much they could expand the schedule. And I'm not holding you to anything, Mike, but is it possible that this league could expand its schedule, or because of the nature where your players come from, are you kind of capped out where you're at?
I think we found ourselves a really good space and time that we can not own the airwaves, so to speak, but we have access to the best players. So that could change. But a change to a more traditional schedule still means that we're fighting for venue space, which, again, long term, I'd love to have purpose-built venues, and that may solve a lot of these problems. But for the most part, we're playing in hockey arenas in major cities that are in a traditional basketball months or, hockey first. And, we're competing against, those buyers and those sponsors and those media opportunities. So it doesn't necessarily make sense, and it doesn't give us access to the best players unless, of course, we were really going to expand our salary cap. And then, we would have to make sure that could actually work. And I'm not sure it could at this point in time. But I still want to continue to build on what we do and how we can do more things within that time period, and maybe extend and stretch a little bit on one end without losing kind of our players back to overseas. But what we've noticed is more recently is initially it was a bunch of players that had to go back overseas. And now we're getting a lot more G League players that really have time up until October-ish. So it may allow us to buy a little bit more time at the end.
And which is a long way for me to get to. Is the biggest challenge your league face is not having the players in market for 9 months out of the year. Yeah.
And there are, now that we've gone and we've been able to bring in more local owners and private owners, what we've noticed is that they want to invest in their people. And if they're able to keep players around, and you'll likely not be able to keep the best of the best because they're going to want to play basketball, and you don't want to pull them away from bouncing a ball and making a living. But you may be able to retain, some U Sports players that are local. You may be able to retain those players that are now trying to look at their next career path and give them and still provide them access to the community and part of the, what we do the other 8-9 months of the year, and continue that 12-month a year business. So I think you'll see more of that. But yes, it is a thing where, our players, the reason we're able to function the way we are is because our players play 8 months somewhere else. It affords us the opportunity to bring them back home, not compete directly with the salaries of overseas, which are pretty substantial for some players, and to have these guys with their name on the back of their jersey in their market, in their country, in their hometown, to help them build for life after basketball.
Mike, if I understand correctly, the league started as the teams were owned centrally, right? And now you have moved and branched into individual ownership. Was that always the plan, or what led to that?
That was always the plan. So we started with 6 teams in 2019. We tipped off. We added Ottawa in 2020, which was our bubble year, the first COVID kind of situation. Stayed with 7 into 2021, and then expanded up to 10 teams. Added Scarborough into the mix, but still had 9 of those 10 teams really owned by the one initial owner. So since September of this year, we've brought on 4 new ownership groups. So now there are 6 owners amongst 10 teams. There's 4 teams that are still, I'm not going to say up for sale. Like they're positioned to be sold if the right group or right individuals come along.
Yep.
But they're also, efficient in terms of where they can last for a while. We're certainly not looking to wholesale anything, but we are looking for individuals in certain key markets to help us continue to grow the game, because every team owner is also an equity shareholder in the league. And that's important to us because it is a league first mentality here. We have to make sure the league is strong, that we don't have the, unequal look at the standings on a regular basis, that there is true parity and everybody's playing on a level playing field.
You are also co-founder of this. So at some point, you came up with the idea or somebody came to you with the idea? Whose brainchild was this?
Yes. So me personally, I was always wanting to remain involved in pro sport on the business side. And obviously in my experience with the CFL on multiple layers, whether it's as a player, as an executive of the Players Association, president of the Players Association, broadcaster, you name it,
yeah.
I got this well-rounded view of domestic sport and certainly the CFL. I befriended a gentleman, Richard Petco, in another line of work I was doing. He had owned a team in a rival league that now is no longer around. It was just frustrated with, he ran a really good outfit, but the league didn't really help him get to where he wanted to go.
Yeah.
It was his idea to start something new and to play in the time in which we play. And he turned to me, knowing my history in sport, and said, "This is my idea. What do you think? Do you think we can make it work? Or how would you make it work?" And then truthfully, I just took the learnings of the CFL and my experience with the CFL over 20 some odd years and said, this is how I would structure it. And this is the way that we should operate. And this is the rules in which we should play. Now, mind you, this was built and built and built, and we're still building some factors of that today.
For sure.
But it was his idea, Richard Petco is the gentleman's name, to try to launch something. And the reason I jumped on board is I had a vested interest in really, this was kind of like a crazy opportunity that came out of nowhere, but I also believed why he was doing it. And he was doing it because he believed that he could create a legacy for Canadian basketball and employ, young individuals across the country in sport, where there weren't a lot of opportunities because there weren't these leagues that were around, and that we would basically create this ecosystem within the basketball community and try to mimic what is done in most of the countries all over the world, right? Because we are North American based, we often get pulled into, this is how the US does it. So you got to go to the NCAA, you got to go to the NBA or the G League, and you forget about everything else. Well, we realized quite quickly that the FIBA game is the most important game in terms of what a national team would fight for and the rules in which they would play. And truthfully, where the gap was, I think, in Canadian basketball. We're producing tons of American-based talent in the NCAA and NBA, but we weren't producing a lot of world-class talent at that senior men's national team level.
How much did you look at, not necessarily just basketball, but the history of what I would call minor pro sports? I mean, we had the Calgary 88s, but we've had indoor soccer and many incarnations before we got to the CPL. I mean, it's a checkered history, really, beyond hockey of finding sports. Even, baseball's had this weird love-hate relationship with this country. What did you look at? Who did you look at for guidance or as an example of success? I know you mentioned the CFL, but, as you're going through this path, how many of these other leagues that failed did you review?
All of them, I think, and I heard no, or you're crazy many times,
Sure.
Not just me. So did Richard, and so did Josh Knuster, our COO, as we were initially going across the country to various markets that unfortunately had been burned, I guess. It may be a wrong word in some cases, but have been let down by pro basketball in their markets, and teams that have come and gone, or they were supposed to come and they only last a little bit of time. And when you peeled back the layers, you started to realize the majority of these leagues were U.S. based. So Canada was just an offshoot, and it was just a throw in. And the Canadian leagues that were attempted or continued didn't really have that strong structure at the league level. They were doing what I feel was the most difficult thing to do, was trying to compete with hockey. in a traditional time of year, right? And it really comes down to the players more than it comes down to competing with another sport. It comes down to, if you want to put the best group on the court, you need to have access to the best players. So we did that, but from a governance point of view, the MLS was one that we spent a lot of time with, because the MLS started as you know, and maybe not everyone knows, as a single entity model, where the majority of the teams are owned by the league or by an individual, and they morphed over time into what they call an investor operator model, which is really what we do. We don't sell franchises. We sell the rights to a team that you operate, but you're also an investor in the league. And that's really kind of how we built it. And then from a basketball perspective, we looked at the NBL Australia. And the NBL Australia, again, a strong domestic league in a country of similar size, similar population. They played in their summertime, which is counter to what, would be normal in basketball. And they had established themselves many years ago and had their heydays in the 80s, but then fell off in a pretty drastic way. And then in walked a Ukrainian billionaire, saw that there was something there, bought everything up, ran it as a single entity, invested in broadcast, invested in marquee players, invested in facilities. And then all of a sudden, over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, they have started to take off. And they're a very well-respected league. They play against NBA teams. They host NBA teams. They've had, that's where LaMelo Ball went to play before he went to the NBA. So they've done a really good job kind of starting over. And when I look at their trajectory, I would say at this point, when we started, we were probably 5 or 6 years behind them. Right now, I think we're 2 to 3 years behind them in terms of where we're going. So that to me was really important. And if you hear their story or listen to their story, it parallels ours very much. So it kind of is the one basketball entity that we can align with from a distance and just try to watch and see what they've done. And the funny thing is, now I know that other teams and other organizations are doing that to us. They're looking at us and mimicking what we've done, which I think is great, because we're just concentrating on doing what we do. If other people want to jump on and this makes sport in Canada better, more interesting, better run, better visually, then I'm all for it.
Does this league happen if Steve Nash doesn't win back-to-back MVPs?
I can't say for certain. That was a major factor, but the biggest one that I could see is the Vince Carter era. Vince Carter.
Okay.
That to me is the point in time where the majority of the players that play for us now, that's the fire that was lit for them to play basketball.
Yep.
The Raptors winning in 2019 is going to light a fire for the next 30 years.
Yep.
And that's the really incredible part of it, is because what Vince Carter did was incredible. What that winning of a championship did was light that on fire and really exponentially grow that part of it. And we're feeling it already. We know the trajectory of basketball in Canada is very high. And we know that, our ability to enter the scene has in some ways kind of galvanized basketball in the country in a good way, in that people are coming together. We're not picking who we want to work with. We're saying, everybody's welcome, and let's get the basketball ecosystem put together. So Steve Nash was certainly part of it, I think, but Vince Carter was definitely the one that affects us today. Yeah. And what will affect us now into the future is the 2019 championship.
And you know what? I think it's probably, this is just a territorial thing, right? Yeah. Because, we all knew about Vince Carter, but out here, Steve Nash was victorious, right. Steve Nash and that. But it seems like it was Bill Wennington. And then all of a sudden, Steve Nash, and now we got, first round picks and right? Like, you can make a case on any given day that Jamal Murray's one of the top 5 players in the world, right? What's the relationship like? What does the relationship need to be like with Canada basketball and the development and the grassroots of this game?
It is very strong. So the very first deal in partnership we ever did, non-monetary, just a relationship, was with Canada basketball. And at this point, we had built out the structure of what we were and where we were going and the rules we were playing and how we were doing it, which is exactly what you see today, minus target score, I guess.
Yep.
And we approached Canada Basketball, and Glenn Grunwald was the CEO at the time, and Glenn and I had a previous relationship, and we respected one another, and we went in and we said, this is what we want to do. And to Glenn's credit, he said, all right, let's do it. Let's do it together. And because we said to him, Glenn, this won't work unless we have buy-in from the National Federation. We want to be the official league. We want to play FIBA rules. We want to clear players through your system. We want to use your officials. We want to partner with U Sports and create the developmental place. Like, we want to really grow basketball across everyone, not just players, coaches, but executives and minor table officials and broadcasters, and you name it. So that relationship started strong. It got even stronger when Michael Bartlett came on as the new CEO a couple of years ago. Him and I really look at what we're doing similarly, and that's how do we get more basketball? How do we commercialize the game of basketball so we can have more, it can do more, it can be more places. So that relationship is really good. We also do work on their behalf to help them throw events like the World Cup qualifiers or men's and women's events across the country. We have the infrastructure to do it. So there's a great relationship of back and forth. And if you looked at the World Cup qualifying team, just on the men's side, of the 31 players that participated, over 20 had ties to the CEBL. So they know they're going to get a player that is still performing at a high level in their non-traditional months when the NBA is playing and they have tournaments here and there. And, we get access or we get our players to put them on a pedestal and wave the flag and be proud of them. So everybody wins.
It also, and this is less of a question, probably a little bit more promotion, in the sense that a great opportunity to develop officials, great opportunity to develop coaches, great opportunity to develop game, scorekeepers. And there is a real opportunity to give a higher end product for, the important people that kind of get forgotten in the conversations for the rest of basketball in this country.
It is huge. It really is. We've seen broadcasters that started in the CBL that are now on major networks. We've seen assistant coaches that are now coaching in the NBA. We've seen players that are now playing in the NBA or playing at high levels overseas. And we'll likely see management leave and go on. And these are all things, we don't see it as a loss. We really see these as gains. Like, this is really the proof as to why we started this. So I know there'll be more. I just got some notes today about some other opportunities, some other people within our system that are going to get jobs at the highest level. And that really just speaks to what we always intended. And in some ways, we're ahead of the curve, truthfully, of where I thought we'd be at this time.
Mike, tell me a little bit about you and your journey. If I'm remembering correctly, you would have come into the league just after American expansion?
No, just during
American expansion.
Oh yeah.
So how much did your CFL time, even as a player, inform you to what you're doing today?
Oh, almost all of it. Almost all of it. Certainly from certain perspectives, right? The way I approach my thought process on dealing with situations is I'm very much player focused first. I understand the impact it will have on the player, which means I need to recognize that before we make a decision that will potentially negatively impact part of that process. So I'm always cognizant of that, and being a player has afforded me that, and being in a league that had a ratio and that was proudly Canadian and that was coast to coast, and I understood what that side meant. But where I really got the lens on the business side is when I became VP of marketing for the Players Association, and we initiated our kind of our program, our marketing piece for players off the field. And we called that Pro Players. It was mimicked off of Players Inc. and the NFLPA. And I went and met with everybody at the NFLPA for multiple years and got a really good sense of how they operate. And my first couple of years on the job was really like I was the policeman and saying to the league, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. The collective bargaining says this. And the collective bargaining was always there, but nobody really enforced it at that level. And I kind of did, and all for the benefit of the players. And then what happened was the league understood, okay, this is good for everybody. If we position the deals and partnership deals this way, we get access to more players. Players are the fundamental biggest part of what you're doing. And then I became president of the Players Association, then was privy to all the financials and served on 5 different collective bargaining agreements. So I got a really good understanding of the inner workings in both sides. So I can wear many hats now, I
Yeah.
feel. And but the biggest hat I wear, it may not be the best business one, is the player's hat.
Yeah.
Because in the end, the players are our biggest asset. So ensuring that they are comfortable and they're okay and they're taken care of is far more important than saving a nickel here or there.
And I will come back to the CEBL in a second, but I'm curious about your observation. Do we have revisionist history about the American expansion experiment? Because at the time the league needed it,
They
really needed it.
We really needed it, and I was a fan since I was 5 years old. So
Mhm.
I again, my time in the CFL, I'm very much a historian as I am as a player. Like, I'm very proud. This is a big piece for me. Going back to the COVID situation and what that was like, and them not playing and what that meant to the history of the institution, which
Yeah.
is the CFL.
Yeah.
So the American expansion, when we look back, albeit it was crazy and insane and very CFL, I
Mhm.
guess, right?
Yes.
To
No,
think
it's a good
about
way of
it,
putting it. Yeah.
it's very CFL. It was a necessary evil at that time. If you
Yeah.
really know what the finances of the league looked like at that time, it was not good. And then the NFL came to the rescue for a bit and kind of lent us some money, and that lasted for several years. And here the league is now, and I'm not sure, you know, what it's hard for me to say from 1994, 95 ish when we were playing all
Mhm.
those games in the US to 2023 now. Um, what would have happened if that never happened? Right? It was not great because it went against everything that the CFL stood for. Um, but I think it saved us. And something tells me, and this may not be something people want to hear, is it may take another event of that magnitude to maybe have the CFL continue on a trajectory that is greater than what it is today.
How do you view future fan development? Because as long as I've been around the CFL, that always seems to be the dogged question. At one point, is we need a video game, right?
Right.
Like they had EA Sports, we need a video game, and then it became fantasy, and everybody's got fantasy. The internet has opened up this whole world. How do you value and where do you see future fan development, even for your league?
Well, I'll start with our league. The one thing we have going for us is that our league is understood. The game of basketball, sorry, is understood by majority of the people around the world,
Hmm.
which provides us access, especially in a country like Canada, where immigration policies are at the forefront,
Yep.
and all these new people are coming, and they want entertainment just as much as Canadian, domestic
Yep.
Canadians do. So we're capturing more eyeballs and more awareness from fans that maybe don't understand basketball, or pardon me, football or hockey. Um, the length of our game is key, right? Being able to get in and out of a game in a couple hours is key.
Hmm.
And I think we've noticed that we live in an environment, or certainly our children do and youngsters do, where it's instant gratification all the time. So if they're not getting it, or if there's no cool factor, or there's no stickiness, or there's no TikTok post that goes along with this league, or there's no, influencer post, etc.,
Hmm.
it's tough to keep traction nowadays. Basketball brings that culturally. It's kind of significant. The music and art and lifestyle and fashion and entertainment is built into it. In the US, I think the NFL has that and has done a really good job of doing that. But I'm not sure the CFL has that level of interest at that cool level.
Yeah.
Um, and again, this is not I'm only speaking from what I noticed different, right? But a lot of those things are, how do you change that? I don't know. Like, can you
Hmm.
go to a shorter football game? I have no idea if that's even possible. I know they've done things to try to improve the scoring and so on and so forth. But even the way that people engage with it, not just in arena or in the stadium, but at home, and access to devices and what you're watching, everything's so consumable in short doses, that sports that tend to take longer, that you know don't have the repeated big plays all the time or quickly, it's hard to deliver that message to kids and for them to get engaged. I guess it's the best way for me to answer that.
How much institutional thinking do you deal with and as a basketball operator? How much this is the way the game is played. This is the way it's always been played. This is the way it should be played. How much of that institutional, history do you have to navigate?
That's where I'm blessed to not be a basketball person per se.
Right. Sure.
So I walk into this situation. It doesn't matter to me what happened before, who doesn't like who, and how the way this is. Target score, for instance. Great.
Yep.
If I listened to the traditionalist, there was not a chance in hell we would have done target score. It just never would have happened. And if I listened to the coaches and GMs and everyone else year one when we tried it, initially I would have pulled the plug. But we got to dare to be a bit different here. We don't want to lose focus of the game and the quality of the game and what's important to the game. But there are changes that need to be made as the fan base changes and what's important to them changes. So, the sport of basketball is pretty good as is. It's got a great flow to it. If you look at the NBA game, it's great until there's a big point differential, and then in comes the fouls and all those things that really led to the creation of the target score, the Elam ending. Yep. So those selective changes are really important. Fundamental changes you try to stay, but even playing FIBA basketball, right? And choosing to go FIBA instead of going NBA rules or NCAA rules was a big change. But if you look at why we're playing FIBA and the importance of playing FIBA, not just for the development of the players, but even the fact that it's 8 minutes shorter, is all part of the strategic thinking that goes against the grain or the institutional way of thinking.
How risk tolerant or how risk adverse would you consider your league when it comes to new ideas? And this one, I love talking to people at your level, because when I say F1 Drive to Survive, what goes through your mind? I mean, that
incredible concept.
It saved the sport.
Yeah,
right.
It's a game changer.
Game changer. And we're always, the problem with sport is now we look to replicate that, but
copycat. Yeah.
Right. Are you in a position that this league would presented something way out there, something different, that you could consider it?
I hope so. And I keep coming back to target score. I mean, we're all getting used to target score. That's a fundamental change to most people. To answer your question, I have zero fear of failure. Right? That's just the way it is. Now, the other owners in the league may have a little more risk averse than me. Yeah. But I think risk is necessary. Change is incredibly important. Not all change leads to positivity, right? But change does lead to new ideas and new ways of looking at it. So I don't want to become hokey in any stretch of the imagination. I don't want our players to play a game that isn't really fundamentally the game that they grew up playing. I just want to provide opportunities to showcase them in ways that makes it more exciting and more entertaining.
Well, but I think that was the kind of the key in F1, right? That racing didn't change. It was the presentation, right? And that is obviously the $1 million. Listen, if I had the idea, I would have given it to you a couple weeks ago in Calgary. Do you have Adam Silver's number in your Rolodex?
You know what? I can certainly get it. I know he has it, and he works for me, and it has a line there, and we've had access to lots of great people, and I'm not afraid to ask questions, and I'm also not afraid to be a bit of a place where new ideas can be tried by others, right? So I'm open to, listen, there's no doubt that when they introduced, the target score concept to the NBA All-Star game going back 3 or 4 years ago, that the NBA just doesn't try stuff for fun. And then you kind of see it work. And there's no doubt they watch our league as players go back and forth from the CEBL to the NBA. And now we've seen the target score in the G League and in overtime and in their Winter Classic. And I think you will see it at some point in time in NBA overtime. But, if there are ways in which the game can be watched differently through technology, or the game could be played differently through new concepts and ideas that are maybe 5 years away, but we can be the footprint that it can be worked out now, I'm certainly open to that. I think the G League is kind of that for the NBA, but I also believe that we can be that for other leagues as well.
Yeah, to me, the history of minor pro sports has always been what can you do for me, right? How
Right.
can you give us a different leg up? And I'm always curious about that part. Tell me a little bit about any advice or any relationship that you might create. My understanding is there's a fairly high level women's league that's kind of going on in your backyard right now in our country, and obviously there's a lot of DEI conversations and gender
Mhm.
equity conversations. Is there a role for CEBL in the growth of the women's game?
Absolutely. My belief has always been, and I've publicly stated this, is that from an infrastructure point of view, an operational point of view, we have that in place. What we don't have is a business plan for a women's league, or the financing set aside for the women's league. And I think that needs to be, I need others to step up. And that's
Yep.
Canada Basketball, who wants to. But again, same thing. We need to
Sure.
find some money,
Yep.
and we need to find some private backers, no different than Diana Matheson's league in soccer, where there's been founders or partners that have come to the table at the outset to allow them to build that. There can certainly be a women's league in this country. I think there's ways that we can do it to grow it over time. It doesn't need to start with 8 teams or 10 teams. I think there's ways to grow it. The talent is here. I love what's happening. You referenced Hoop Queens, which is the
Yeah.
league that's going
Yeah.
on here in the Toronto area. And then there is another league out in the East Coast, the MWBA, and I've helped them to some extent, just from a governance or organizational perspective, and they've taken off. So it's great that it's being played, and I think, at some point you're seeing, if you look at soccer, for instance, I think with the World Cup coming to Canada, that has really been a driving force behind investment in soccer, and rightfully so.
Yep.
And I think, when you start to see the senior men's national team and the women's team in basketball continue to rise to prominence on the World Cup stage, and then in Paris, maybe being an opportunity to medal or come close, that I'm hoping will start to drive more awareness and more dollars to the basketball scene. So, we have to win, right? And this is what Michael Bartlett and I talk about. I mean, it's if we can get on that podium, and if we can start winning at the world stage, we're going to see what happened with the Raptors, winning the title, and the 3 million people that showed up, and all that great stuff that comes with it. But we need to do it first, right? We need to start winning. And I know the pieces are in place, and the investments are being made around the table, but further investment is needed to continue to grow and to mimic what happens all over the world. If we can get just a sliver of, investments in infrastructure, or investments in cash, or investments in whatever that hockey gets to basketball, well, then the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
It really is. And I think it's coming. And a lot of that is politically, decided upon and lobbied upon. And but the dynamics of the country are changing. And I think there's a space for that in the future.
How big's your player pool? I mean, if you how
Endless. Pretty much
sure,
endless.
it's endless,
Yeah.
but you've got a ratio. If you were to
Yep.
maintain your current ratio, how many, and I'm not holding you to this, but how
No.
many more teams do you think you could add?
I think, to answer the question, how many teams we could have 20 teams and not have a reduction in talent, just based on what I know is coming.
Okay.
Right. Based on the 200 plus, at the NCAA, and then college, and then U Sport. And if you, I know you've said this just in general, but if you watched our Canadian talent, it's hard to tell at times who the Canadians are, who the internationals or the Americans are. The talent is very high. And our U Sport talent is continuing to get better and better and better with Canadian coaching and staying here, which is very encouraging.
Yeah.
Where do I think we'll get to? I think we'll get to 12, and we'll take a bit of a pause and really, really kind of get our feet under us, because there's been a lot of growth in a short period of time. And, things are going really well. But I also know we're going to have to make some key investments in certain areas in our offseason to make sure that we are able to keep the standard high and even get better and better, not just from a player point of view, but from a staffing and a content and a broadcast and all that kind of stuff. So I would say in the next couple years, you'll see us at 12. And then from there, it's just going to be selective. I think there's room for a third division. I think you can go West, Central, and East if everything falls into place. But we just have to do it smartly and attract the right groups and the right markets to ensure that we can continue to grow it safely, right? We don't want to be on a list of leagues that have come and gone. That's not the intention. We want to be here for a long, long time.
You already said you're not risk adverse, and not much worries you. But are you okay with bringing in a multi-team corporation to come in and ads because they want to keep their ticket staff and their entertainment staff busy for 3 months? The CFL is a prime example, right? You had individual owners, and then you had, CSEC owns a team, and that sort of thing. Would you prefer, just single entity owners?
That's a great question, because there is value in bringing, obviously, groups or individual groups, in this case corporations, that do this on the regular basis. So there's the MLSEs, the OSEGs, the Oilers Entertainment Group, you name it. We all know who those groups are.
Yep.
And I believe there's a place for them. I just don't want to lose what really has gotten us here, and not suggesting it will. So we'll trend with that carefully, but I also think it's exciting, because if you look at what's happened in Winnipeg and the access to Canada Life Center and being able to play in that facility, and what's that has done from a perception of the Sea Bears and the ticket sales and sponsorship, it's really raised our ability to become, considered a top, league in Canada. Yep. So that comes with relationships with the big guys, right? Yep. And when we started to build the league, I always thought that our league would be a great complement to OHL owners, CHL owners. They're major tenants in the arena, or they operate the arena. They got staffing in place, infrastructure in place. They got email lists and sponsor lists and all that stuff. And I still believe that to be the case. Mm-hmm. When you start taking the next level to the MLSEs and the OSEGs and all, then you become part of their collective. And I think we built the league in a smart way, that it's a league first mentality. If we continue to attract individuals, groups, corporations that believe and commit to the league first mentality, then it doesn't matter where they come from. As long as they invest in basketball, we'll be okay.
One last one, then I'll ask you about the rest of the season. And that, and the forward-looking question. You said it before, and I've heard it before, that one of the goals is to have a specific building built to host a CEBL team. Yep. Pipe, is that a dream? Not a pipe dream, but is it a dream? Is it closer to reality than we think? Because that gets my attention. If you're now into a position where you're talking about facilities, that's a different level.
That is a different level. We will see it. It is a dream, and it's also becoming a reality. We'll see it in Scarborough. Sam and Nico have committed to build a facility. They have the land. They have the green light to do it in Scarborough. It'll be a 5,000 purpose-built arena for the team, but also multi-purpose to hold other events. And when I say purpose-built, I think it means it's open to indoor sports, but made for indoor sports, right? Yeah. With a court that's centered, that has the proper seating arrangement and sight lines and everything you need. So I think Scarborough will be a great first step. I will continue to lobby, government, municipalities, etc., because not just on the growth of basketball and the growth of the CEBL, but just the desperate need for facilities and indoor space. And I think the part we want to play is just to be a sounding board that if there are new facilities built, let's take Calgary, for instance, if there are new facilities being built, that, if there's secondary facilities or other ways to position, indoor sport, that at least we do it properly at the outset. Yeah. Because I think what we're getting into now in a lot of our facilities is that, it's an afterthought. But to fix it now is considerably more money, considerably more time, a lot more paperwork, and let's do it right the first time. Yep. So that to me, and we're seeing some new facilities being built. Ottawa's got one, maybe two coming, right? With the OSEG guys doing that. Obviously, Calgary's got new facilities coming. So those are the interesting conversations to be had. If we're going to spend money, let's spend it once and let's spend it right.
For us here in Calgary, we're kind of going through this race for the first time. Tell us a little bit about the playoff structure. And is that something that you can see changing, or is it another strength of the league? Because possibly one playoff game and then everybody goes to Vancouver, right?
Yes. So
not everybody, but
not everybody. So Right now, obviously, this is our first year in a conference model. We're really excited about that because we're going to have conference playoff games. They'll start with a play-in game for the fourth seed versus visiting the third. Winner of that game will play in the East or West Conference semifinal against the second seed. The first seed in each division moves on. In the West case, it's still a host seed that goes in Calgary, pardon me, in Vancouver. And there's single elimination games till you get to championship weekend, which is in Vancouver. And then it's the conference finals and championship game. I can see it. We've really created this championship weekend event, which is, a destination event for everything basketball. And it's got all those things that basketball brings, and lifestyle and art, culture and food and all the things I've mentioned.
Yep.
And it really is a festival with awards and the games and concerts and everything. I don't ever want to lose that festival event. Can that festival event become something else? And can the playoffs, now that we're in a more consistent model, revert back to more traditional playoffs? That could be a possibility. And that would mean more home playoff games, no buys to the playoffs, because I think we're at a point now we don't necessarily need that. It was always done to at least let us know that we'd have one local team in the playoffs to help with ticket sales, and that's part of a growing a league. But I do believe in the future, we will investigate it, and I think we believe there are some benefits if we can continue to maintain that event style thing. And this year we'll run two events because we're going to have championship weekend followed by the Clash, and the Clash will be a really good opportunity for us to not only test the Quebec City market, but also test that event as maybe a future event in the CEBL for years to come.
And on top of that, you will still have a club team participating in the Americas tournaments?
That we are revisiting that as well. And,
Okay.
and I'll tell you why. One, that the way that it's run and operated is a bit difficult. The timing is very difficult.
Yes.
We don't get access to any of our best players.
No.
And I don't think we are happy losing. And that's not to say that
No,
the players,
but I get it.
Yeah. If we're going to commit, we want to commit knowing we can potentially win. And based on the fact that our players are, 90% of them are back playing overseas, it really reduces our pool. Not to say the guys that have played aren't great. They're great, but they just don't have that long time playing together, and they're put together. And it's a tough places to play when you're going over to Puerto Rico and Mexico and Nicaragua. So that is still up in the air. That likely we won't comment on for some time. But I think our eyes are open to the fact that we really enjoyed it. We didn't have the success on the court that we would have liked. We were able to help establish Calgary, having an event there. We were able to help establish Brampton by bringing this year's BCLA there. So it really served our purposes. Are we at the point where we want to continue, or maybe we want to take a step back and take a breath and then reevaluate it? And I think it's probably the latter.
You going to make your way out to Calgary here anytime soon?
That's the plan. I keep looking at my schedule and realize I don't know how I'm going to make it to all the places I want to make it to.
I know.
But, Calgary has done tremendously well, certainly on pace to, be hosting a playoff game. But I mean, anything can happen in this league at any time. We know that. We've seen that. I really enjoy coming to Calgary. The fan base has been incredible. The venue affords itself to be loud, right? The low ceilings. The team has played really well at home. The games have been exciting. It's a great cross section of the city when I go there, and it's great to see our local owners that have, come in and really taken a chance on us to be successful. I think that's important. I know the players are really enjoying themselves there. It's a great community to be a part of. So, yes, I hope to make it back out there, hopefully for a playoff game in the future.
I like it. Mike, thanks so much for the time today. I love the conversation. It was nice to be able to sit down and really get deep in on the league. It's been a success so far here in Calgary. No reason to think it won't, but I do appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Mike Morreale, he is the commissioner, co-founder of the CEBL,